I often struggle to try to explain to people why Blizzard Entertainment was so important to gaming 20 odd years ago. And not because I can just say they were great, because we have great game companies now, but I think the context back then was that everything else sucked in comparison. It wasn't even close. Nowadays, we're spoiled for choice. Games are everywhere. You can play Fortnite on a toaster. But back then, there was only so many online games. Consoles didn't even go online. This was before Xbox Live, and Blizzard was a game company that specialized in having an online component when not many games did, and their gameplay was immaculate. It was very easy to control, and the immersion and the art and everything was just blowing everything else out of the water. They were gaming pioneers, and they specialized in having the personality or company culture of perfecting their craft. There was a phrase that they had called Blizzard Soon, TM, a joke to say that when something, an update or a game was coming soon, they would say it's coming Blizzard soon, which really just meant when it's done, because they had a reputation for taking their time to finish something and make it great rather than releasing garbage, which is kind of the new reputation they have, I suppose, which is why it was so important to me as a gamer after so many years, over a decade of them not releasing a game, when they finally came out with Overwatch 1 in 2016. I reorganized my entire life to try to cover this game full time, and here, 7 odd years later, I'm still here covering Overwatch. It's been quite difficult for me as a lifelong fan to learn so much from behind the scenes in the past few years about the toxic corporate culture that has infested my favorite game company of all time. And we used to just say, as gamers, assume that it was the Activision meddling that caused so many problems. But I think it's actually even simpler than that. It isn't just Activision's acquisition of Blizzard so many years ago when they were trying to scale up World of Warcraft. It's specifically one guy, one horrible piece of. After years of leaks and more now recently, now that he's gone, we now know the full extent of Bobby Kotick's meddling. This is what got us the obnoxious monetization in World of Warcraft, the Warcraft 3 refunded fiasco, or the entire tragedy of the mismanaged Overwatch 2, which in year 2 is a lot of promise, but on day 1 was mostly a cash shop asset flip and a rug pull for the other half of the game being gutted and, in my opinion, canceled, a detail they left out until many months after releasing the sequel. I might just be a little bitter about that still. I don't actually think it's accurate to blame corporate meddling on a faceless brand, because not all brands are run the way that this one had been. We have a face that we can put a lot of the blame on: Bobby Kotick, the Activision CEO that looks like he stole the ring from Frodo and slowly is transforming into Gollum. If you're unfamiliar with Bobby Kotick, he's sort of like if every single horrible character from the cast of Succession was rolled into one guy.
Because I love it in here. I f***ing love it!
Bobby represents everything someone could hate about corporate America, a man whose claim to fame is milking some of the most beloved franchises of all time into destruction, such as the case of Guitar Hero and Tony Hawk, or into desperation, as resource-starved dev teams are forced to generate more revenue for less content for the consumer. This, of course, is the case of our beloved tragedy of a game, Overwatch 2. Here's some highlights of Bobby's brilliant leadership, which ranges from incompetent to pathological. He once threatened the life of an employee. He oversaw and ignored years of mistreatment of female employees and used manipulative disinformation to deflect from it further, eventually settling out of court. And of course, one of the harshest stories of that era was a woman who took her own life after some developers were passing around pictures of her with The Office. The details get even worse than that, to be honest. It's even hard for me to talk about. But let's just try to imagine the type of person that sweeps these types of things under the rug to try to keep the status quo, business as usual, keep the dollars rolling in. And that was the lead narrative designer from World of Warcraft. Oh gosh. One of Bobby's go-to plays was to seize the news cycle by dangling news drops of beloved games to deflect from other mismanagement. In 2019, when the Blitzchung scandal emerged, Overwatch 2 was famously announced to steal away the headlines, putting the hardworking and talented developers out in front to be sacrificial mouthpieces for his agenda. Overwatch 2 was overly ambitious in its first inception and was nowhere near ready to promise what it did, a mistake that forever tarnish the reputation of Blizzard down the line. Further, the focus on mobile games, so ATVI could get more games like Candy Crush in their portfolio, Diablo Immortal is a byproduct of this strategy, as a cash injection for the company while we had to wait for Diablo 4. What's wrong, guys? Don't you have phones? Today's video sponsor is HelloFresh. America's #1 meal kit keeps getting better. HelloFresh takes the stress out of meal planning with delicious recipes and healthy ingredients. I love HelloFresh because the process of meal planning and shopping can be a drain on both time and energy. I'd rather be gaming. With over 45 dinner options, you'll always have a tasty dinner waiting with all the ingredients there. And now you'll get one free breakfast item in every box. Breakfast, it's the most important meal of the day, and I think the tastiest. Kick off 2024 right, whether you're looking to lose a few pounds or gain some peace of mind. Try out HelloFresh's easy-to-follow recipes today. Click the link in the description or use my code to get free breakfast for life. One free breakfast item per box while the subscription is active. Bobby Kotick's leadership of Activision Blizzard King was all about the stock price at any cost. Imagine the Snowpiercer train, where Bobby's at the end of it, feeding your childhood memories, love for the gaming art form, and women into the furnace to keep the train going. Here's some other lighter Bobby Kotick highlights. A personal favorite of mine, not only do I mostly blame him for the entire doomed to fail business model of the Overwatch League, it had been revealed by insiders he forced the Overwatch League Grand Finals, the first one, to have a musical act, and he picked DJ Khaled as the musical guest 2 weeks before the event itself, paying extra for him to leave the tour he was on with Beyonce and Jay-Z, mostly just because he saw him go viral once or something. The crowd looked visibly bored, and there wasn't any light choreography or extra elements you'd expect from a full show because there wasn't time to plan it. It was mostly just DJ Khaled walking around the stage saying, "Another one." But the tales of Bobby Kotick aren't done yet. Another one. There are ones that just came out recently. Greg Street, legendary developer for World of Warcraft, then Riot Games, went to Twitter to tell about a hilarious story where Bobby wanted to bring his donut machine to work for the employees. But it wasn't some cute little air fryer. Instead, it was a mammoth industrial scale donut maker, the kind that would be in a Krispy Kreme factory. Greg said it traveled around in a semi, one imagines, with highly trained escorts and perhaps armed guards. And Bobby Kotick was going to bring this machine to Blizzard campus. The power consumption alone was an internal debate, and the power cables could present a tripping hazard. So in the end, Bobby's crazy idea to bond with the employees didn't happen. Greg finishes in saying Bobby did visit with the WoW team once or twice. He told us that he wishes we were faster and less expensive, which I understand to be his trademark, but in fairness was also probably objectively true of the WoW team. Now, there was a clarification that came out after this saying Greg may have exaggerated things here a little bit, but I thought that was kind of obvious anyway. Still, these types of stories are unique to Bobby, even if this one in particular is a bit overblown. Recently as well, former Overwatch community manager took to Twitter claiming that Bobby Kotick essentially left both the community team and thereby the developers out to dry, with no attempts to curve the biggest review bomb in Steam history, of which the community manager had warned was going to happen months in advance. Now, of course, much of the negative backlash on Steam was warranted. There had been a lot to be upset with Overwatch over the years, but imagine a world where the Steam release coincided with other good news and announcements or other improvements to the game. No, none of that. Just releasing on Steam, give us more money, please. And while he's beloved by the shareholders, evidently, it's amazing that this next one didn't get him fired. He's the one to blame for losing the NetEase deal, which is required for them to operate in China. That's like a huge percentage of all gaming revenue comes from there. So he's not even good at the job you thought he was supposed to be good at to begin with. What does this guy do? Is he just famous for forcing an asset flip on Call of Duty year on year and then applying the same strategy to Overwatch? The only thing I think this guy produces is hatred for him and his company. It's rare in life that you actually see a guy that embodies the movie villain so well. Like, I think they should take Ramatra out of the Overwatch story and just put in Bobby Kotick. That would be a more menacing villain for Overwatch to fight. But of course, this isn't a negative video. That's just all the stuff that we're finally getting over. The next era of Overwatch doesn't have this guy. Companies don't have to be run this way, actually. You see, because Bobby was seemingly trying to play the Game of Thrones at the top of the food chain, Phil Spencer from Microsoft has said the exact opposite, where he's looking to enable each team individually to run their studio and teams the way they think is best. Which over the past few months, even in the transition period away from Bobby Kotick, I've already started to notice this, but now we're leaning in towards it, and the future looks bright. I felt the start of this was the attitude at BlizzCon this past year, where all of the teams had less shock and awe and were just straightforward gamers talking on stage. In years past, it would have had the attitude like they're celebrities, because, well, I mean, they are, but over time, that tended to grow as resentment towards the audience with a lot of, you think you want it, but you don't type energy. Now Blizzard has turned an entire new leaf, and there seemingly is a mandate for them to demonstrate that they're listening to the audience rather than condescending to them. At BlizzCon, they clued into looking to change the biggest complaint, which is the monetization of Overwatch 2. We should be hearing updates about this rather soon. But there was a very strange announcement from the executive producer of Overwatch 2, Jared Nuss, which talked on SVB's Group Up podcast that it's their goal to make heroes available on a release. Now that wording is vague, and it could just mean there's more trials like they did with Mauga, but I want to highlight the stark contrast with how this kind of thing was handled under the Bobby era. If Bobby was still in charge, any kind of toying with the business model you might expect to shake up the stock price, so I would be surprised they would even be able to say that at all. Because back then, Blizzard kept all news under tight lock and key, never announcing something that was a work in progress idea, especially if it was going to benefit the consumer. Because as you might expect, there could be brutal ramifications if they're trying to be too fair with the business model. Stock price might go down, and that's all Bobby cared about. I think it would be great if we could get Overwatch to be like Dota 2, with all of the characters free, but with premium cosmetics and extra battle passes here and there. I think that's a model that most gamers find to be pretty fair. Now, I don't know for certain that they're going that far, but even moving in this direction at all is a good step and more in line with the Phil Spencer approach to running this company, as the teams are allowed to work independently and make choices that are good for their game and their community. It's hard for me to see a guy like Phil Spencer oversee the mistakes that Bobby Kotick made with a game like Warcraft 3 Refunded, where they gutted the resources because it wasn't going to be a smash hit game. I mean, then why make it anyway? If you're going to do it badly, that would stand to reason, right? But that's not the way Bobby Kotick operated things. And thankfully, Phil Spencer with Microsoft have a very different strategy altogether, where they're looking to have a catalog of games overall with Game Pass. That's very different. The Bobby Kotick method wants to have these super games that milk the most amount of money from an individual consumer with that one game in that ecosystem. Whereas when games are more in a catalog, you can have them be their own individual identity, and they don't have to necessarily maximize profit in any given one. It's more about having a wide base of games to have the overall subscription. So a gamer can say, I want to try something new and unique, as opposed to each game needing to have the broadest appeal possible. It can have a unique experience, which oddly enough, a lot of people were worried about the monopoly that Microsoft might be creating with this system, but I, for one, accept our new overlords because it seems like that's a better environment than we've had previously. You know, Steam's had a monopoly for a while as well, and we have mixed opinions about that. A lot of gamers kind of like that Steam does things their way and they dominate the PC market. Well, Microsoft has a chance to compete on a different level and provide different benefits, I guess, to gamers. Just imagine their strategy being less about screwing the consumer and giving them a quality product for a good price. It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it works out for them. And I think you can start to see this already with the Overwatch team and what they're willing to do. Recently, they've been doing radical experimentation with Overwatch's format, and more to come in the near future. The way that they're developing Overwatch 2 now is for the players who actually play it, rather than to try to garner an entirely different audience with a new game or conquer the esports landscape, for example. We're seeing this with the experimentation with the quick play format. In Season 9, we will be getting a ranked overhaul and change in the philosophy of how easy it is to play with friends. Further experimentation with hero bans and other things like that. From a live service perspective, these are risks, but it's what's required for them to compete with other games and as well keep Overwatch's identity unique. You'd likely get a different series of opinions based on any given Blizzard game right now, but overall for the Overwatch community, I think we're happy that they're at least trying things. They're interested in doing things like increasing the hero release cadence, for example, was a big news drop of something they might do that they said last year, and now is the time to prove if they've got the ability to even do that. I'm starting to get the sense that with their actions, that they now finally have the momentum behind them to develop the game the way they've they've always wanted to. And for my last point of the video, I wanted to talk about the response that I have gotten from some internal developers at Blizzard reaching out to me. It was a few group up podcasts ago where we started talking about the Microsoft acquisition, and I've been noticing this culture change. Now there's even more evidence that keeps coming out that I think makes this argument that we're really are getting a Blizzard 2.0. What they told me was that internally at Blizzard, lots of the different teams have been sharing clips of the podcast around, partially because I think I'm an older gamer that's played all of their games, SVB as well, fan of StarCraft, but a lot of players don't know just how important old Blizzard was, but the devs that work there surely know. And the culture about trying to make the best product possible is starting to regain momentum, or maybe it's instituted now, let's say, with the big bad Bobby Wolf out the door. It's an entirely different culture where now they can focus on just doing a good job with the passion that they came to that job with. Like a lot of the employees there, we know this, were Blizzard fans for years and years like I was, and were inspired to become developers to work in that industry for a company like them. And they use that reputation in many ways, not just against the consumers, the fans, the gamers, but against those employees themselves, the developers, many of which started their entire career just to work there. They exploited by paying them less and abusing them in so many ways. So I'm really starting to feel like it's changing around. Like we're gaining momentum and are able to build, and us, all the community, be part of Blizzard 2.0 to help influence this direction, as opposed to Blizzard 1.0, which they had magical work that perhaps had some evils behind the scenes we didn't know about for many years. Now it's more transparent and we can grow along with them, as opposed to feeling like they were on top of some high castle in their ivory towers making magic happen and we couldn't influence them at all. That's how I felt working with the developers of Overwatch 1, entirely different in Overwatch 2. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Are you with me in the optimism train for Blizzard 2.0 and excited to be part of the community that's helped transforming them for the better? If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave it a like, and don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to actually get notified when our videos come out, and support us today by checking out our video sponsor, HelloFresh, linked in the description, and sign up and get free breakfast for life. That's been it for me. I've been Frito for your Overwatch. I'll see you guys next time.